So I'm going to show you how to make graphs, or remind you how to make graphs and put trend lines and so on the graphs for your lab activity. This is a different set of data. This obviously is for the Segway video, not for the videotape that you're analyzing, but you'll get the idea from watching this video of what to do. So here I am in Excel, and I've got the data file open. You'll see in this first column here I have time in seconds, and then position in meters, and actually I have the velocity in meters per second. You can calculate the velocity from the position time graph just by drawing tangents of various points and finding the slope of those tangents, but it's a bit time consuming. So I gave you the data for both position and velocity in your data file. So to make the first graph, we just highlight the time and position data that we want to graph all the way down to the bottom. And then we go to the insert menu and we choose charts, and the kind we want is a scatter chart, XY scatter chart. And I'm going to choose this one. As you hover over them, you kind of see what the types of graphs are. So we want this scatter chart, and I'm going to put the scatter chart with no trend line or anything like that, no line joining the points together. So there's my graph. Now I am going to actually move this chart. So if I right click on the chart area, I can choose move chart right here, and I'm going to make it a new sheet. I'll call it, I can actually type a label in here, position time graph, something like that. And when I click OK, I now have a second tab down here at the bottom. It says position time graph. So my Segway data is here. My position time graph is now here. Now when we first look at it, it looks sort of like a constant acceleration, like the slope is increasing, but got this kind of flat area down here. Not too sure if this is a what kind of a graph this is, but if I right click on one of the data points, I can add a trend line, and I've got various options for the trend line. It's obviously not linear. I can try putting in a polynomial. It won't even let me select power, so it's probably not a power graph, but polynomial of order 2 is like a quadratic function basically. So I can put that in there, and if I go down to my options, I can put the equation on the chart, and I can even put an r² value in there. So that's pretty good. Insert that trend line. So there's my graph. I can format my graph using these chart tools up here. If I click on design, quick layout, I can choose this option. I can choose all these different options to kind of show me what it's going to look like here. If I hover over them, I'm going to choose that one. That gives me my axes titles, so I can put those in. It gives me a legend here, but I can get rid of that. It's like the type of title in at the top and so on. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that when you choose a design format like that, it gets rid of your trend line if you've put one in. So I'm going to add my trend line back in there, polynomial degree 2, and put the equation on. So if we zoom in a little bit on this graph, we see that the oops, go back there, zoom in a little bit. I can see that if I look at my trend line, it's a pretty good fit over here in the graph, but it's not particularly good fit here. So it's probably not a constant acceleration because this trend line isn't really fitting the curve there at the beginning. So in any case, that's I can compare this with what my prediction would be now. If I go back to my data, I use Segway data. If I want to graph the velocity time graph, I have to highlight the time data. So I just run that down there. And then I also want to highlight my velocity data, but so that it holds the time data selected, I have to hold down the control key. So as I highlight my velocity column, I'm holding down the control key on my keyboard. So now I've selected the time and velocity data. I could insert a XY scatter graph again. You can see that, yeah, it's definitely not a constant acceleration. this particular case. And if you actually watch the video of the Segway, you see that it kind of doesn't accelerate very quickly at the beginning, and then it accelerates fairly uniformly after that. So if I go to move chart to make this a full page thing again, there we go. So there's my velocity time graph. Again, I can set the design type that I want by choosing here, so that I've got my axes, and I can put a trend line on this one. It's not exactly linear, but it's fairly linear. But if I right click on my data points and that trend line, this time I'll leave it as linear, and I'll put my r squared value and equation on there so I can get the average acceleration, which would be the slope of this line. Let's take a look at it then. Don't need this legend, get rid of that. So we can see that the r squared value is still fairly high, 0.9777, so it's a fairly good straight line. You can see that the data is sort of evenly distributed about the line, some above and some below, so that kind of does sort of make for a fairly good trend line. So the slope of this graph would tell me my average acceleration, and you can see here in the equation. So 2.075 for my slope, which would tell me in this case my vertical axis is velocity and my horizontal axis is time. So meters per second divided by seconds, meters per second. So the slope of this represents the average acceleration of the graph. If I found the area between this trend line and the time axis, will tell me the displacement. So I could find that area and I could compare it to the displacement from my position time graph. So we can see that the overall displacement for the whole graph is about 3.5 meters. So when I calculate the area between this line and the axis, I should get about the same 3.5 meters. Remembering that this little area here would be a negative displacement, and then this would be a positive displacement. If you watch the video, the Segway does actually kind of slide backwards a little bit before it starts moving forwards. That's why we get that bit at the beginning there. So that's how to make the graphs and roughly how to analyze them. So hopefully that video is helpful if you're not quite sure about what to do with the data from the experiment last week.